Hello, my name is Shobha Rao, and I am the author of Indian Country. I'd like to start off by telling you a little bit about the book. Indian Country follows two main characters, Janavi and Sagar. They are newlyweds, but they don't really want to be married to each other. They were sort of forced into this marriage. And on top of that, Sagar, the husband, is a hydraulic engineer, and he's accepted a job to take down a dam in southeastern Montana. And so they travel to Montana, and soon after they arrive, and Sagar starts his work, the body of a Native American woman is found dead at the base of the dam. So the novel is, follows the two characters as they try to unravel how and why this woman died. So Indian Country is about a suspicious death. It's about the reckoning with native land. And it's about a marriage that's really just tested by history itself. When I think about all of the things in my life that have inspired the writing of my novel, I would say one of the ones I keep going back to is when I first moved to the United States. I was 7.5 years old, and I didn't know much English. But what I recall is a couple of weeks after we moved here, a little boy came up to me, and he said, "What are you?" And I knew enough English to say, "I'm Indian." And to which he then said, "Well, then what tribe are you in?" And he lost me. I had no idea what he meant, what he was asking, what a tribe was. But, of course, I soon came to learn what he meant. And that kind of launched this lifelong fascination with the history of that word and how Christopher Columbus had come to the New World in 1492 and had insisted that he'd landed in India and thereby called indigenous Indians, and how that insistence and that mistake has sort of persevered and persisted to this day, hundreds of years later. And so I would say really that incident with that little boy was the true beginning of my writing of Indian Country. In addition to that, when I think about the other parts of my life that have found their way into this novel, one of them is when I read an article about the stretch of highway in British Columbia called the Highway of Tears. This is a 450-mile stretch highway in a kind of isolated part of British Columbia. And along this highway, dozens of Native First Nations women and girls have been found murdered or have gone missing. And many of these crimes remain unsolved. And in this article I was reading, a First Nations elder said something to the effect of, our girls and our women have been forgotten. Nobody remembers them. They've been forgotten. And I walked away from reading that article and thought, something has to remember. They cannot have been completely forgotten. Something has to remember. And over time, this conviction grew in me that land and waters remember, that land and waters hold human memory. And that conviction became one of the main themes and anchors of my novel, Indian Country. And I do realize that my novel deals with some heavy themes such as racism and morality and colonialism and guilt. And I guess, in addition to an understanding of those things, what I hope the reader walks away with, the biggest thing that I hope the reader walks away with is a sort of understanding that the search for home is universal, that no matter where we come from, no matter whether we've crossed the borders of multiple countries, or whether we live in the town in which we were born and raised, it doesn't matter. The search, the seeking, the yearning for home is universal. And sometimes the seeking, the searching takes us to a place where perhaps, we don't speak the same language as the people of that country. And perhaps even they don't want us there. And that can be really terrifying. And challenging in so many ways. But again, what I want the reader to take away is just as the search for home is universal, so is the possibility of grace that we can give each other. That is my hope for the reader, to take away from the novel. The writing of my novel was actually a pretty long process. It took about 7 years. And in that time, I wrote and discarded 3 whole novels. But through all of those years and all of those iterations, what remained constant are these interstitial stories. They're only about 2 to 3 pages each, but they're, sort of anchors through the novel, 12 of them. And they, what I wanted to explore was really this geological memory of land and waters over time. And so I have these interstitial stories spanning 200 years. And I gave them sort of what I hope is a mythic, sort of fable-like feel. And I love them so much that they sort of remain constant through my 7-year writing process. And before we finish, I'd like to recommend a couple of books that I really loved and I've read recently. One of them is called Hurricane Season by Fernanda Melchor. And she's a Mexican author and journalist. And Hurricane Season is an incredibly inventive, beautiful, challenging book. And it's got no paragraph breaks at all. So that alone is visually pretty interesting, but the book as a whole is incredible. The other book I'd like to recommend is called The Lost Journals of Sacagawea, and it's written by Deborah Magpie Erling. And this book also is really makes creative use of language and structure, and is gorgeous as well. And both of these books, though they can be challenging, they're also incredibly rewarding. And so with that, I'd like to do a quick reading from my novel. And before I read, what I should explain is that there are many ways to take down a dam. The most obvious one is detonation. So you detonate the dam, and it comes down instantly. But the problem with that is that it can really damage river ecology, and the flora and fauna of the river. So the more common way in my research is basically to poke holes, or what are called notches in the dam. So you poke, you make a notch, you let the water stabilize between the reservoir and the river, and then you poke make a notch that's a little bit lower, and then you restabilize the water, and you keep doing that until the reservoir is drained. So that's what you need to know for this reading. By the end of the day, 5 months after he and Genevieve had arrived in the Cotton River Valley, the first notch was cut into the dam. Everyone clapped and hurrahed when the first chunk of the dam broke free. Sagar, beaming, watched the water that had been held back for nearly 100 years gush through the notch and rejoin its river. Sagar's plan called for 4 notches in all, but it wouldn't take that many before the burial site would be submerged. Maybe the second notch would do it, or the third. But none of them would see the second notch for a long time to come. And Rennie would never see it, because 2 days later, on a cloudless, Saturday afternoon. She was drawn through the first notch and found dead hours later at the base of the Cotton River Dam. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you to Boulder Bookstore for giving me this opportunity to speak with you. So thank you, and I hope you enjoy Indian Country.